Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. Friday, October the 14th, 2016. Back home, Midtown Manhattan, the Daily Racing Forum studios. We're presented this week by Woodbine. Big day of racing up at Woodbine on Sunday afternoon, and I think we need to take a quick acknowledgement, take a look and see what's on tap. The early pick 4 guaranteed at $150,000. The late pick 4 guaranteed at $250,000. The early pick 5 guaranteed at $50,000. The late pick 5 $150,000. Plus, sort of the granddaddy of them all, the mandatory payout in the super high 5. It's the nightcap, the final race Sunday afternoon. $464,321.44 is the carryover. 15% takeout. All of those wagers have a 20-cent base increment, and we've got a deal for you. You can get free online bonus past performances on DRF.com for Sunday's card up at Woodbine. The Matt Bernier Show presented by our friends north of the border at Woodbine this weekend. We'll dive into some more Woodbine stuff in the second segment when we discuss the Canadian International, sort of the headlining event on a fantastic day of racing up at Woodbine. You've got the EP Tail, you've got the Arctic, get a couple other races that are worth mentioning, but the Canadian really is sort of the headliner. You've got some nice Europeans coming over. We'll dive into that in some time. Let's start things off. First and foremost, my name is Matt Bernier. If you haven't picked that up already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. If you're watching on live.drf.com, thanks for doing this. If you missed it live, you can pick it up podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, iTunes, ESPN.com. So many different ways for you to find the show. If you really want to, you find it. I have to be honest, it's kind of nice to be back here doing it. It seems like it's a little bit more controlled. Not that doing it out on the road isn't fun and much more condensed, obviously. We're doing 6-7 minute shows. But it's nice to sort of get back to the routine, the sort of, knowing what's going to happen and having a nice rundown and not having 15 million things going on. So we can get back into this. This show normally every Friday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. It's about a half hour. Sometimes it's an hour. Things will change a little bit going forward just based on scheduling, as you've seen if you've paid attention over the past 2 weeks. But enough of that. I'll tell you some more as we have more time to come as far as differences of scheduling is concerned. Let's talk about the thing that everyone's most interested in this time of year. Breeders' Cup. As we get closer and closer, we're just, I believe, 27 days, not even, it's less than that at this point, from the Breeders' Cup World Championships out at Santa Anita. It's going to be the first Friday and Saturday of November, and we've got fantastic racing going on. And really, over the past few weeks, it's been the preps leading up to the Breeders' Cup, and you have all these horses with their final sort of tune-ups getting ready for the big dance, whether it's the Classic, whether it's the Mile, the Sprint, the Filly Sprint, the Distaff, you name it, they've been prepping. And really, I'm only going to talk about 3 divisions and really pertaining to 3 horses in particular, because prep season is essentially over. Maybe we'll see some of these horses wheel back that we'll see at Woodbine on Sunday, or maybe even some of these other races that we'll talk about coming up later on in the handicapping segment, whether it is the Pebbles for the 3-year-olds. That seems a little less likely. But maybe the QE2 Cup down at Keeneland, where it's a grade 1, we'll have some big 3-year-old names. Maybe some of them will wheel back in a few weeks for the Breeders' Cup. But let's talk about the horses that we've seen over the past 2 weeks. And in their prep races, they were defeated. Let's start off with Tepin. Obviously, she ran in the First Lady. She was defeated by Photo Call. It's one of those things. How does it, 1, affect your overall impression of Tepin? And 2, how does it affect your overall impression of the division as a whole, as far as the Breeders' Cup Mile is concerned? If you go based on overseas books, it sounds like some more Euros are a little bit more interested in coming over now that Tepin was soundly defeated down in England last weekend. I don't think that takes anything away from Tepin overall. I think she deserves to be the favorite going into the race, and I won't be surprised at all if she runs a winning race. It's one of those things now, all of a sudden, maybe the water becomes a little bit murkier. It seemed pretty clear that Tepin was strictly those to beat, and she is, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying she's not. But maybe going forward, now you've got a little bit of a reservation. I thought the Woodbine Mile may have taken a little bit out of her. It certainly wasn't. I didn't want to say that the Woodbine Mile was the race that took something out of her. It was her more sort of workmanlike performance than we've seen her in quite some time. I wonder if the Ascot trip took a little bit of something out of her. She came back last weekend, and again, she wasn't embarrassed, but a horse loose on the lead, went out there, did her thing in Photo Call. That sort of leaves that division, I think, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more up for the taking now. I think she's still going to be the favorite. She still deserves to be the favorite, but maybe now all of a sudden the Breeders' Cup Mile becomes a race that maybe you want to take a shot against a short-priced favorite in Tepin, and you're sure to get a 13, 14 horse. You're going to get quality runners left and right. Flincher lost 2 weeks ago. That was at Belmont Park. That was over yielding going in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, and it was a scenario where, again, you want to talk about pace. Pace makes the race. Ecto was out there for Todd Pletcher. Pletcher beat both of the big horses. He also had Photo Call when she beat Tepin. Flincher was out there, did his thing. The problem is he doesn't like off-going, and that's what he got that day. And it sounded like Chad Brown going into the race thought that that was a major concern. This was a horse over in Europe he despised less than firm going, and that's part of the reason he came over here, not only for the Lasix, but also for the firm ground, as most Europeans come over here for. I love that immediately everyone afterwards saying, well, now you can poke holes in him, and again, this is a horse that he's run second in half of his lifetime starts, and you can't rely on him. No one was saying that before that race. Everyone was saying that he is strictly the horse to beat as far as the Breeders' Cup Turf is concerned, and because he loses one race, now all of a sudden he's vulnerable. I don't believe that for a second. I think the only thing that got him beat that day was that ground at Belmont Park, and the good thing for the connections of Flintshire, Chad Brown, and Juddmonte Farms, you're not going to have to deal with less than firm going at Santa Anita. It looks like that turf course is in fantastic condition. I was out there 2 weeks ago. And it seems like, again, crazier things have happened. 2 years ago, we had a little bit of rain on Friday night of the Breeders' Cup weekend. But it seems like all things, you're going to have fast and firm. That's what Flintshire wants. You're going to have to deal with a couple of Europeans coming over, most notably the Arc Triumph winner and reigning Breeders' Cup Turf winner. She defeated Golden Horn most recently, last year anyway, I should say, is the most recent Breeders' Cup Turf. But she won the Arc a few weeks back. Hey, look, she's coming over here and she means business, and you've got to view her as a major contender. And maybe some of the horses from the Canadian International could possibly also wheel back and run in the Breeders' Cup Turf. But Flintshire, again, you want to talk about reactionary. The most recent thing you saw is the thing that everyone wants to talk about. Flintshire losing at Belmont Park, for me, does absolutely nothing except increase his price. And I think that's a very interesting thing for me anyway, because I don't think he loses anything in that race. And I like that people are all of a sudden talking about like he may be a legitimate contender. Maybe he is. Maybe Pletcher's finally gotten him good, but I can't help but think that the ground had a lot to do with that race. And the last horse in division we'll talk about briefly, as far as now that the prep is over and the loss, how do we feel about the horse individually as well as the race as a whole? Beholder loses in a just absolute slobber knocker to Stellar Wind in the Zenyatta at Santa Anita 2 weeks ago. Immediately, and myself included, I said that maybe at this point in the game, she's just not as good as Stellar Wind, and Stellar Wind has just sort of improved to the point where she's the best horse as far as that older division is concerned. But if you believe the Beyer speed figures and some other figures, Beholder is arguably in career form at this point, and maybe she's just running into a better horse. Who knows? I think the most fascinating thing about that division is neither one of those two horses that ran giant races in the Zenyatta are going to be favored come Breeders' Cup Friday, because Songbird is going to go into that spot as a heavy favorite. She's unbeaten from 11 lifetime starts. But you've got to keep in mind, this is going to be a filly taking on older horses for the first time. From a figure standpoint, she hasn't run nearly fast enough to win a race like the Breeders' Cup Distaff. That doesn't mean she can't, and this time of year we see the 3-year-olds jump up in a major way. But I think it's worth keeping in the back of your head. We lost Cavorting earlier this week. She's retired. She had some bruising in the cannon bones. That's disappointing, but it looks like she'll go off, and she's sound, all things considered. But as far as the Distaff is concerned, so we lose one, all of a sudden Beholder might be 3-1, 7-2. Doesn't that sound appetizing to you? Stellar Wind might be 5-2, and all of a sudden Songbird is even money, 6-5. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. I guess in the long run, what I'm trying to say is a lot of things changed. Maybe the value won't change greatly as far as the off odds are concerned come Friday and Saturday at Santa Anita Park for the Breeders' Cup. But you're going to get a little bit of increased value on Tepin if you still believe. You're going to get increased value on Flintshire if you still believe. And you're still going to get a very square price on Beholder if you still believe in her. Because, look, if she had won that race in the Zenyatta, she was certainly going to be the favorite, or close to it anyway. Now you can make the case she may be third with Breeders' Cup Distaff, one of the all-time races if you just look at that race, how it's shaping up. We're going to take a quick here on the Matt Bernier Show. When we come back, we're going to dive in to the Canadian International, and again, we're presented by Woodbine this week. Let's dive into their marquee event, the Grade 1 Canadian International. Stay with us on the Matt Bernier Show.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they fail and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and is open 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home, and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the 4-goal.
12:10 on the East, 9:10 on the West. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. We're presented by our friends north of the border at Woodbine. Big weekend of racing at Woodbine. And you got to keep in mind, on DRF.com, free online pass performances are available for the entire Canadian International on Sunday, and you can see right there at the bottom of the screen all sorts of fantastic wagers. You've got guaranteed pools left and right, and it's not listed in there, but you've got to keep in mind the mandatory super high five payout in the final race of the day at Woodbine. Just because the graded stakes action is done doesn't mean that all the wagering is done. You've got a carryover of $464,321.44 in the super high five. It has to go. Has to go in the nightcap on Sunday afternoon. All of the wagers that you see listed there, the guaranteed pools, base bet 20 cents, 15% takeout in the super high five. I would imagine well over $1 million in the pool. You've got to get involved. And speaking of Woodbine, let's talk about their biggest race. I've still got a little bit of work. Dan Ellman and I will have previews of the Canadian International in full, as well as the E. Taylor, as well as the late pick 4 sequence. Dan and Mike Beer will also have a couple other stakes races, including the New Arctic from Woodbine, coming up later on this afternoon. They'll be up on video.drf.com soon enough. But let's just kind of give the Canadian International a little bit of the love that it deserves. And let's take a look at the entry card if we could. You've got a field of 9 signed on in here, and I'm not going to give you all of the sort of nuts and bolts because, again, we're going to have that video up soon enough. But I think it's a fascinating race simply because you have a lot of horses exiting the Northern Dancer, which was a grade 1 up at Woodbine a few weeks ago. And then you've got the ever-interesting European shippers. And boy, doesn't it just feel like the Europeans are just better than what we have right now, at least in this race? Look, World Approval, I love World Approval. Mark Cassidy's done a fantastic job with his horse. Julian Leperoux gets the mount back. You look at the most recent start, though. If he couldn't win it 1.5 miles in that spot, cutting out a half mile in almost 54 seconds, 3/4 in almost 1:20 and 1. How's he going to get it done here? He's controlling speed again. I just can't envision a scenario. Maybe the ground will help him. I think it's supposed to be firm on Sunday afternoon. Maybe the ground will help a little bit, and he didn't appreciate the sort of less than firm going. But that's a bad excuse because 3 back in that race down at Monmouth in the UN, he got a perfect trip, and he took to it like a duck takes to water. So I love World Approval. I just don't think this is the sort of race that gets it done for him. Danish Dynaform is a really nice little horse for Roger Atfield. Problem is, 1, a little bit slow, and 2, he's going to be pace compromised like he was in the Northern Dancer. He's a tough one to see anyway as far as the win ends, or maybe underneath spice things up. The Pizza Man was the winner of the Northern Dancer, and I think we've got to take that race sort of with a grain of salt because that pace was just such a farce, and that's how I have it written down in the formulator. You can make trip notes, you can make all sorts of different notes. The pace was a farce in that race, even for turf standards. I can't imagine him being that close to the pace again in a spot like this, but at the same time, there really isn't that much speed signed on. Other than World Approval, I can't imagine too many horses are going to be forwardly placed. Wake Forest also exits that race, and I would imagine, at least for my money, he's the one that I want coming out of it. I felt like he was a little bit pace compromised. I thought he put in a good bid. And the Pizza Man, credit to him, I mean, dug in gamely, and you can make the case that was the best race of his 2016 campaign, which has been a little bit lackluster, but hey, look, he's added a grade 1 to his resume. The Wake Forest, I just feel like he's the one coming out of the Northern Dancer. If I want anyone, I want him to use underneath. I don't think he can win the race, but I think he's one that maybe you can spice up some exotics. Javier Castellano has the mount 10-1 on the morning line for Chad Brown. Let's get to the Europeans, because the Europeans are really the key to this entire race. You have the 3 Idaho, and Idaho is ultimately, I think, the key to the race. He's the lone 3-year-old in this spot. He got basics for the first time for Aidan O'Brien. My money, the best trainer in the world. That's no disrespect to any of the top connections we have here in the States or in Canada. But Idaho is a horse. He ran so well in the Investec Derby. I thought he ran very, very well. Just look, got beat by a better horse in Harzan. U.S. Army Ranger is a nice horse as well. Comes back, runs his eyeballs out in the Irish Derby. Can't quite get there. Comes back off the layoff, runs a bang-up race 2 back at York. And then at Doncaster, it looked like he was ready to roll, and he just took a disastrous step, dumped Shamey Heffernan. Thankfully, Heffernan's getting ready to come back from the injury, and this horse seems like okay, otherwise Aidan O'Brien wouldn't have sent him over here. Gets Lasix for the first time. He's 5-2, the favorite on the morning line. Many ways, he's the horse they're all going to have to beat, even as a 3-year-old. You have the 5 Dartmouth going out for Her Majesty the Queen, so I'm sure she's going to take some sentimental money, particularly in Canada. She gets Lasix, this horse I should say, the colt gets Lasix for the first time, goes out for Sir Michael Stout. Stout has won this race a handful of times, I believe the last 2 runnings of this. Don't quote me, we'll have that brought up as far as the race preview is concerned on video.drf.com. My concern with this horse is he's just kind of a grinder. Seems like a stayer. I don't think he's quite as brilliant as a couple of the other Europeans coming over here. Won't be surprised if he runs well, but at 7-2, for me, that seems like a bit of an underlay. I haven't priced it out yet. Still have a little bit more work to do after this show is over. But Dartmouth, one of the Europeans I really want in this spot. The 8 Erupt is another Euro that I'm not thrilled with, simply because you just look at his 26 form, doesn't seem to be quite what it was last year when he was a 3-year-old. As a 3-year-old, he was a very nice horse. Finished a good 5th in the Arc behind Golden Horn, Trev, a couple other runners in there. He was a Group 1 winner at 3. And this year, he's just, I know he's Group 1 place, but he just hasn't come back the same. And that most recent start for me, that was very disappointing. 4-horse field over there in France at Deauville, and he just never really picked his feet up. I thought that was a disappointing effort. The horse I'm most interested in as we wrap up this segment regarding the Canadian International up at Woodbine Sunday afternoon is Protectionist. Protectionist is a fascinating horse for Andreas Volder, comes over here. You look at his form leading up to his sort of highlight of his career, winning the Grade 1 Melbourne Cup in 2014, was fantastic. In France, in Germany, in Australia. Then he has sort of a trainer change, and he stays in Australia for an extended period of time. Basically the entire 2015 campaign. And it was a disaster. He never picked his feet up at any point. And maybe it was fair to say, oh boy, is it over for him? He goes back to Germany, back with Andreas Volder, and this horse has just ripped off 3 fantastic races. I love the way that they've taken care of him and eased him into things, and it seems like this has been sort of the goal all along. He comes over here for Volder, very, very conditioner, knows obviously how to win here in the States. I think this is a fascinating horse. He's 3-1 second choice on the line. I don't know how they're going to bet it, but my pick for the Canadian International up at Woodbine on Sunday, again, we'll have the entire nuts and bolts for you up on video.drf.com later on this afternoon, but my pick is going to be the 9, Protectionist for Andreas. We're going to take a break here on the Matt Bernier Show presented by Woodbine. When we come back, we'll dive into 2 more races that we'll handicap this weekend. The QE2 Cup down at Keeneland, the Pebbles at Belmont Park, both 3-year-old fillies races on the turf. Stay with us.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the monster of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker, the exotic journey.
$12.18 East, $9.18 West, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. We're presenting our friends up at Woodbine this weekend. Canadian International Day is on Sunday. Let's talk about 2 other races that will be going on Saturday. We'll have both of these covered for you on live.drf.com starting at 3 Eastern. Let's start off down at Keeneland. In many ways, look, obviously the Canadian International and all the big races up at Woodbine on Sunday, those are fantastic races. Strictly from a betting standpoint, this race may be the race of the weekend. This is the Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup down at Keeneland. $500,000 the purse, mile and an eighth on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. Those are my odds in the far right screen if you're watching on live.drf.com or on YouTube or the other ways that you can see video version of this. My odds, not the morning line. That's what I think would be fair value on these horses. So obviously, I won't be betting Catch a Glimpse because I'm not going to get 4-1 on her. I do think she's a bit of a vulnerable favorite in here, and I think the most likely winner is the 7-time Emotion, who I've made 7-2 for Jimmy Toner. I've loved this filly for quite some time. If any of you remember going way back, I picked the Belmont Oaks when we had one of our NBC shows. She ran a bang-up race, I thought, and couldn't quite catch the lone speed in Catch a Glimpse. I think the difference this time around is I think Time and Motion is just getting better. Mike Watchmaker, when we did the Weekend Warrior segment, I thought summed it up perfectly. Maybe Time and Motion is just better than Catch a Glimpse right now. And we're going to take a look. This is these two fillies throwing it down up at Saratoga in the Lake Placid Stakes back on August the 21st. I didn't think there was any excuse for Catch a Glimpse. She's out here on the front. She got a half and 48 and 2. She's going to do what she always does. Goofy with the lead changes, and I love how Johnny rode Time and Motion. He knows what he's got underneath him. You see her just finding her best stride now, and she's actually going to kick clear as they get closer to the wire. Time and Motion to me is a fascinating filly. Catch a Glimpse, you can't deny she's a rock-solid horse. She shows up and runs a race every time, and I think she will run very well down at Keeneland Saturday afternoon. Time and Motion, though, there's a part of me selfishly I'm a little disappointed that she's running in this spot and they didn't go to the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf with her because, and maybe they still will, they could. I think it's a quick turnaround. I don't love that idea, but I thought she would have been sneaky for that race. I think as a 4-year-old, I think Time and Motion could be an absolute monster for Jimmy Toner. I like her. I think she's the most likely winner of the QE2 Cup, and I think a vulnerable favorite is Catch a Glimpse. As you can see one last time, my odds on the far right-hand side of the screen. Look, it may not be a race that I'm betting on. It's a fantastic race. I haven't talked Harmonize. I haven't talked about Mocat, On Leave for Sugar McGahee, Hawksmoor coming over from Europe. There's so many good horses in this race. Just from a wagering standpoint, make sure that you get a good price or demand value. And look, maybe you're a little bit more bullish than I am as far as prices are concerned on some of those horses, but that's what I view as far as fair odds in that race, the QE2 Cup. Let's move on to the Pebbles up at Belmont Park. 12 3-year-old fillies. They're going to mile on the turf. Fascinating race. You can go a number of different ways in here. I think a vulnerable favorite goes out with Chad Brown. And I know that sounds just absolutely asinine considering the way that Chad fires. But I think Ancient Secret is a vulnerable favorite. I would imagine she goes off favorite. I believe she's 3-1 favorite on the morning line. I made her 6-1. I don't like the way that she's been moving in some of these most recent starts. And I know she's 4 for 5 lifetime. But up at Woodbine, she didn't run a step. She had a brutal trip. Don't get me wrong. And some horses don't take to the Woodbine configuration one turn. I thought she was terrible. I just didn't think she ran it at any point. Of the two Chads, I want the outside runner. She doesn't mind. But even her, I don't love her either. She's 1 for 5 lifetime. She's run very, very well here in the States, but she hasn't gotten it done. I think a live long shot in this race. I'm not going to give you a most likely winner because that would be stupid. 9-2, that for me, that I can't give you a most likely winner. Live long shot, though, I think is Ultra Brat. Ultra Brat's going to go up for Graham Motion, a very, very intriguing filly in this spot. She's going to stretch out from 3/4 of a mile to a mile for the first time. Her most recent start was her first start on the turf. I thought she got a brilliant ride from Joel Rosario. He timed it beautifully. She put in this big bid. She's got to stretch out a little bit now, but I think that's well within her range. I believe she's got a nice pedigree. I want to say It's Tea Time is in there. I think she's a half to that horse, so maybe the distance isn't going to be any sort of an issue. I think she's a very interesting live long shot. I pegged her at 9-1. My pick in the race, because I know Mike and Dan have gone over this race, my pick in the race is going to be the 8, Insta Irma. I thought Insta Irma ran very, very well most recently up at Belmont Park. She figures to be forwardly placed, or at least close anyway. The additional distance isn't going to be a problem. I made her 5-1. I think the most likely winner in the race is Stella Rose at 9-2. She ran terribly down at Laurel Park most recently, but at the end of the day, if you can't forgive one dull effort, you're a little bit harsh. We're not going to cut. We're going to call a quick audible here, Craig, in the other room, just because I'm a little bit heavy on time, and we're just going to do away with that final break because I can move on. We're okay. From handicapping ponies, let's move on to handicapping the pigskin. I got a tweet the other day from a gentleman on Twitter saying, you know, your year-to-date record is 6 for 9, 6-9-0. Why would I listen to you? You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to. Or if you were smart, you should have said, I've been fading every one of your picks, and I'm 9-6 on the year. That would have been a good way of putting it. Plant that for see if I have a bad week. I've been saying for 2 weeks, I don't need all 3 in a row. Don't need 3 for 3. I just need to win series. I got to go 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3. Continue to move forward. We're trying to get to the 52%. You got to beat the VIG in here. 3 games this weekend, 6-9 overall on the year. Hopefully we can get closer, inch closer to the 500 mark. 3 dogs all on the road. The first one, Jacksonville, plus 2.5 at the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are the epitome of a dumpster fire. I tweeted earlier this year that I really thought they were the worst team in the NFL. I still believe that, even though they're 1-4. I think Jacksonville's much better than it looks on paper. I believe they're 1-4 as well. But that's a team that got a little bit of talent. I've never been a huge T. Yeldon fan, but I think Blake Bortles is okay. 2.5 on the road. I understand. I would have been more happy. Maybe you, with your guy, maybe you got a bookie. Maybe you use some sort of a site. Maybe you can buy a half point to push that to 3. I would suggest that if you can. I like Jacksonville plus 2.5 on the road at Chicago at Soldier Field. Second game. The 49ers +9 at Buffalo. Now, look, maybe this is just a little bit of my bias sticking out that I'm a New England Patriots fan and Buffalo beat the Pats, hand them their only loss thus far in the season. I really thought Buffalo was teed up. That's a classic sort of letdown game for Rex Ryan last week when they went out to L.A. And guess what? They got the job done. Now, Rams are no great shakes, but at the same time, I feel like there's something else going on in this game that has to be acknowledged. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick is now going to start for the 49ers. Going cross-country, going west to east is never an easy thing for these teams, but 9 points seems like a pretty big number. And you've got to imagine that Kaepernick is going to be better than Blaine Gabbert. I mean, he can't help but be better than him. So I would imagine all of a sudden you get Kaepernick, and maybe that gives the team a little shot in the arm. Chip Kelly, I've always thought that was going to work out for him. I mean, Colin Kaepernick is that sort of mobile quarterback that can run that sort of up-tempo offense, I think much better than maybe someone like Gabbert could. More along the lines of a Mariota when they were up at Oregon together. So the 49ers, I don't know if they're going to win the game, but I think +9, I think it's a giant number. Another one, if you can buy a half point, or maybe you want to tease that, throw something in. I just can't envision the 49ers getting completely blown out by the Bills because I still don't really believe in the Bills. The last game, the third of three, the one that I'm most puzzled with. The Atlanta Falcons are getting 6 points at the Seattle Seahawks. I understand the 12th man. I understand everything about Seattle at home. They're very good. Don't get me wrong. Atlanta, in the first week of the year, I didn't think they were very good, and I didn't know what to make of them. The second week, after seeing a little bit more, I said, well, you know, maybe they're not as bad as I thought they were. They've rattled off X amount of wins in a row. They've lost one time on the year. They went into Denver last week. They were kind to me. I took the points. I thought they would be close outright anyway, and in fact, they went on and won. I can't imagine that Atlanta getting 6 points on the road. Atlanta, you could make the argument, is one of the top 3 or 4 best teams in the NFL right now. Right there with Seattle. Again, don't get me wrong, but almost a touchdown difference. You usually hear the sort of old adage that home field is worth 3 points. If that's the case, I mean, you really think there's that much of a difference here? I don't know. I feel like the Atlanta Falcons are still getting disrespect. I bought into him. Maybe that's a dangerous mistake. Matt Ryan, maybe he goes the wrong way. He's looked very good. Obviously, Julio Jones, we know he's a superstar. Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman and company. They're playing well. I'm going to go with the Falcons +6 at Seattle. So a quick whip through of the 3 games. The Jags +2.5 on the road at the Bears. The Niners +9 at the Bills. The Falcons +6 on the road at Seattle. Those are your 3 picks. Hopefully we can inch closer to 500 on the year. 1227 on the East, 927 on the West. The Matt Bernier Show, presented by our friends up at Woodbine. Let's take a look at the DRF Live slate for Saturday afternoon. Starting at 3 o'clock Eastern, myself, Dan Illman, Mike Gavir, we'll bring you through all these good races. We've got not a ton as far as graded stakes are concerned. Only one. But it's a quality race. The other stakes races that we've got to deal with, the Cal Distaff is really an intriguing race because you've got Enola Gray trying the downhill turf course for the first time. Don't know how that's going to work. It's a short field, though. And then you've got the Pebbles following that up at Belmont Park. You can see we're going to bring you right through Santa Anita's 7th race. Post time 6:30 Eastern. Following that, I believe we're going to tee up the late pick 4 video for you at Woodbine on Sunday, as well as the Canadian International. And as far as everything else is concerned, one more time, fellas, if we can get the graphic for our friends up at Woodbine Sunday, it's a huge day of racing. You're going to want to stay tuned not only to DRF Live, but you're going to want to get onto DRF.com and get your free past performances online only for Woodbine for the entire Canadian International card. You've got the Grade 1 EP Taylor, you've got the New Arctic, you've got a couple other fantastic races. And again, you see all those guarantees down there. Big pools, big payoffs, 20-cent base increment, and that's not including the nightcap on Sunday. I can't stress it enough. You got to get involved. They've been carrying it over for so long. Almost $500,000 as far as the carryover is concerned in the Super High 5 with a 15% takeout. It's a non-winners of 2 lifetime. I know it's not a sexy race, but guess what? If it turned into a sort of life-changing score for you, it's certainly a sexy race. So you're going to want to stay involved. Check that out. DRF.com. You get your free pass performances for Woodbine on Sunday. Thank you to our friends up north of the border for sponsoring the show this week, the Matt Bernier Show. You're going to want to stay tuned, obviously, to DRF Live all day. You get all the latest news and nuggets, particularly leading closer into the Breeders' Cup, whether there's defections, whether there's workouts, whether there's you name it, whatever it is. DRF Live, this is the place to be. The news scroll underneath the video player. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern here on DRF Live. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me online at Bernier_Matt on Twitter. And as far as the show is concerned, normally every Friday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, barring some other things. Breeders' Cup week is going to be interesting. We've got a couple of ideas percolating, so we'll keep you updated on that. But the next week, we'll be here, right here, DRF Studios on Friday afternoon, noon Eastern. And as we always do, to wrap things up, we're going to tee you off with the formulator race of the day for Friday. It's going to be the Buffalo Trace, Franklin County from Keeneland. Elman and I took a look at it earlier in the week. Here it is. Best of luck this week, and we'll talk to you again Friday.